Hello, my name is Ray, the Freedive Nomad, and I'm a freedive instructor, and I also do YouTube videos, and I have a podcast on freediving. And I wanted to talk to you about one thing that Rickson Gracie said about diving on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast that was totally wrong. So the legendary BJJ fighter Rickson Gracie was recently on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast to promote his new book called Breathe. You may be wondering, what the hell does BJJ have to do with freediving? Well, I'm a freedive instructor and I have a blue belt in BJJ. So anyways, on the podcast, he got one thing really right and one thing completely wrong. He said, and I quote, "The big change in life happened to me when I learned how to breathe." I feel the same way. And yeah, the simple practice of knowing how to breathe can have huge benefits in your life. But where he got it totally wrong was, if I want to go dive, I want to hyperventilate. He said that this increases the oxygen circulation around his body and also helps it get into the cells, and that this tripled his time underwater. Now, hyperventilation has some benefits and has got time and place for it, but not in freediving. Of course, you can hyperventilate and go freediving, but it's very, very dangerous, and here's why. But first, we have to know why we have the urge to breathe. And it's important to know that the urge to breathe has nothing to do with your oxygen levels. It has everything to do with your rising carbon dioxide. And we all know that carbon dioxide is created as a byproduct to oxygen being used by our body. So what does hyperventilation do? Hyperventilation is a great way to expel the CO2 in your body very, very quickly. And so when you have a lot lower CO2 in your body, it delays the urge to breathe. So to help illustrate this, I wanted to do a chart up here for you. So this is your oxygen level. And as you hold your breath and dive, it goes down, 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 down. This point is where you black out. And when you free dive, blacking out is not something you want. It's something you want to avoid. So normally, if you don't hyperventilate, as you dive, your your CO2 levels go up, up, up. This is where you have a strong urge to breathe. And now you all know I have terrible handwriting. So what happens when you hyperventilate, your starting point for the CO2 levels in your body is much, much lower. So after you hyperventilate, you start off here, and as you can see, the urge to breathe can happen after you black out. You won't have a strong urge to breathe until you black out. So this gives you a very, very false sense of security. One thing that Rickson mentioned is that hyperventilating, increases the oxygen, yada, yada, yada. It actually doesn't. When you hyperventilate, you have a minuscule increase in oxygen, but a very large decrease in your carbon dioxide. When you have less CO2, your blood becomes more alkaline. When you hold your breath, CO2 rises and makes you more and more acidic with the rising CO2. When you are alkaline, the bond between hemoglobin and oxygen is very, very strong, making it harder for the oxygen molecule to detach from hemoglobin and difficult for your body to access it. When you hold your breath, CO2 rises, you become more acidic, the bond weakens, and with the increasing acidity, you get increasing accessibility to that oxygen, which is counterintuitive, I know, but that's why some people feel it's really meditative and calming when they hold the breath. This strength of the bond between hemoglobin and oxygen is called the Bohr effect, B-O-H-R, which you can research on your own if you're more curious about it. So what can we learn from this? Don't hyperventilate before you do breath hold diving, free diving, etc. Number 2, take a freedive course. Unless you take a freedive course, you're not going to know how to avoid very easy mistakes like this. A lot of people say that freediving is very dangerous, and yes, it is very dangerous if you do not know what you're doing, but it could be a relatively safe sport when you do. So take a freedive course. And lastly, never ever dive alone. And that's it. If you are a total newbie to freediving and you're interested in learning more, I have this podcast called Total Beginner Freedive Podcast. Each episode is only about 5 to 10 minutes, and you can access that through freedivepodcast.com/podcast. Or you can follow the link below. Hope you learned a lot. Bye.